What's going on, guys? Sensible Prepper Live. Welcome. We are going to talk about a hot subject today about tariffs. And I'm not an economist, and I have, and really we have a very complex economy, but there are some things we're going to discuss, and we're going to go through some things that possibly we may have some shortages. I think these are going to be temporary overall. But with that being said, even temporary, if you're a prepper and you want to make sure you're in good shape, you want to consider these things. And two, just consider them because they're coming from other countries. If we're depending on so much from other countries in a grid down situation, that could even be more catastrophic if it's not being produced here. Now, before we get started, a big thank you to Exotac. Guys, fire is primal. It is something that is essential to survival. It will boil your water, cook your food, give you warmth, give you light, and it can keep predators at bay and just builds morale. And having a fire kit is essential. But Exotac is one of the best fire starters out on the market, and you get 20% off. Use Such20 with the link down below in the description. And we really appreciate Exotac for sponsoring today's episode. Also, check out suchgear.com. We have some pretty cool stuff over there. But we also have a lot of deals. We have contraband videos that we can't show here. And we just have a lot of cool stuff going on suchgear.com. So check that out. Guys, there is a lot of consternation, a lot of unknown when it comes to the upcoming tariffs. One thing I think is very interesting is Trump, all the way back to 1988, has been talking about the trade imbalance with tariffs. This is the thing to remember. We have a $918 billion trade deficit. That means that we are taking in that much, almost $1 trillion, that we're bringing in than we're putting out. That's the first thing to consider here. And one of the reasons why this is happening is to restore more of a trade balance. Free trade is really the way it should be. That's the way we should have free market and being able to trade for goods and services and to be able to just keep a status quo for the quality you're getting. But what we're finding is that there is a massive trade imbalance that will affect our country more than any other. These temporary tariffs and the things that are going on right now are to really restore a better trade balance. And that's one thing for some reason, and listen, this is one thing to always consider, even what I'm saying is you need to look at people are interpreting things a lot of times with bias. And they're getting on one thing and they're just blowing it up. I think it's funny that over the years we've talked about, everything's made in China, man, made in China, made in China, made in China. And yet we're not willing to do what it takes to change that. It's great to have China as a trading partner, honestly, because they do produce a lot of goods that we can find that are fairly inexpensive. We are a consumer nation. We're the largest consumer nation in the world by far. And we do buy a lot of things, and we want those prices to be as low as possible. The problem is we're not able to compete in their markets with our goods and our services, and that's the problem. So let's just take China, for instance, 67% tariff on U.S. goods. You send something to China, it's a 67% tariff. It's very difficult for us to compete in that market. Whereas for us, it's a 34%, I believe it's 34% tariff on their products coming in. And so it's the one thing that's happening with other countries like the EU, 39% is what they charge us. So if I send this hat to Europe, to the EU, there is a 39% tariff. That is aside from their VAT tax, which they also charge. When the U.S., we charge 20%. It's about half for the trade. So when our products go over there, they're charging 39%. When they send their products here, we're only charging them 20%. That is a trade imbalance. And it's going to keep them from purchasing products that are made here in the U.S. Now, a lot of you guys are going, well, we don't really make that much. Well, we do. We do make a lot. One thing that we do, and we're really big on, is industrial type machinery, whether it's turbines or big generators or a lot of industrial equipment. We are the world leader. We're also the world leader in just technology itself. And so we are really behind the eight ball because a lot of our products, let's take a Surefire flashlight. Those things are expensive. They're made right here in the U.S. They're good quality. They're great lights. They're a couple of $100. But when you go to a Chinese light, like I'll just be honest, I love a good Olight flashlight. I'm a huge fan. I think that there is a place for Chinese products here because I can get this for under, for less than $100. And so, and honestly, just as good a quality. So what we want is fair trade. That's the big thing. It's not that we want to bar these products from coming in, but that we want to have a fair exchange. Again, almost $1 trillion in deficit. EU is protected by a lot of the money that we put out for their defense. Japan, 46% tariffs. We charge them 24%. It's almost like half. Yet we protect Japan. We're partners with Japan. South Korea, same thing. But one thing we're seeing right now is a lot of negotiation. So a lot of these nations are coming up. The EU is really right now. I mean, they're the head of the EU conglomerate, for lack of a better term, is actually wanting to negotiate. They're wanting to bring these down. So one big thing about these tariffs and the all that's going on with the tariffs is not necessarily these tariffs should be in place. None of us really want that. Not even Donald Trump. What we want is for them to trade fairly with the U.S. The goods and services that we're sending out need to be in a fair balance because otherwise we are losing our wealth. And guys, we've seen it already. We're losing our wealth in a lot of different areas, just like we did in Ukraine. We're just dumping these billions of dollars into these areas, and billions of dollars are going out all over the place. And we are under a massive trade deficit. So honestly, right now, this may be a short-term, some buckle up, tighten up your belt a little bit, kind of get locked in. But overall, this should actually improve the economy. Don't listen to some of these people that are just running their mouths. I was watching something today and I thought, oh my God, you can just see the partisanship that was in anything that happens. Nancy Pelosi a number of years ago, she had a speech on the Senate floor and she was going on and on about how we need to get this deficit down, how we've got to, get these tariffs in line. Even Bernie Sanders was talking about it a lot. And then, of course, when it's not their party, they move to the other side. So be careful not to get wrapped up in all this stuff when we really need to have some balance with our deficit. It's huge. The price of gold has gone up to $3,147. Now, right now, it's kind of back down just over $3,000. But $3,000 is ridiculous for the price of gold. It was just around $2,000 just a couple of years ago. And so we're seeing a huge influx in gold prices. And that's before any of these tariffs, any of these things. Guys, we've been through the economy. It has been in a mess for the past 4 years. And I think it's going to take some major adjusting to get us back on track. Yes, there are some things. Just like I heard one, I think it was Patrick Bet-David, that said, it's like taking medicine. At first, that medicine's like, ooh, I don't really like that. But that medicine is what helps us to recover. And that's what we're looking for. Now, there's a couple of side effects, and then we're going to get into some of the things that's going to affect us. One thing we're seeing now is that a number of countries are moving. They have vowed to move their manufacturing right to the U.S., which definitely helps with the trade deficit. A lot of countries are coming out and saying, hey, we're going to start producing stuff here in the U.S. That gives us more jobs. It gives us a lot more ability. And again, it lessens that trade deficit. The big thing is it really opens up markets here. Plus, it allows for our goods and services to be able to be sold abroad at a lower price. the one thing is, guys, is if they can get something for the U.S. and it's not only is it a little bit more expensive, but the quality is really there, and that's really what we need to depend on. Not necessarily just prices, but what is the quality of what we're getting. And so when we're sending out things, people are going to want quality, and so it ups the trade deficit. It allows for goods and services to go there. Yes, they're a little more expensive, but they're not hugely expensive. I was talking to someone in China last week, and they were talking about some of the backpacks. And they were really wanting a Mystery Ranch backpack, which is made right here in the US. It's a great pack. It was incredibly expensive. There was no way to afford it. And so, and then to even have something shipped, the price on that would be just, you couldn't do it. I mean, it just gets to be ridiculous. And so while products may be a little more expensive, they're still desirable. But if you put a tariff on there, or like in the EU, add a VAT tax to that, then you're really getting the prices to where it's not even affordable. And really it's ridiculous to pay those kind of prices. So that's what the basis for this is. Now, again, this economy is very convoluted. There's a lot of factors that go into it. The stock market moves in certain ways. And a lot of times we take the traditional ways that have been demonstrated to us, and we think that's just the way to do it, but it's not necessarily the truth. And so, guys, the big thing is deficit, free trade. We need to work this out, and we need to negotiate. South Korea is another one. They have a really high tariff rate on the U.S., and we come in at about half. And yet we have military bases. We protect South Korea. It gives them a lot of opportunity not to spend a lot of their money on their national defense. Same thing again with Europe. So those are some factors that also should be factored in as well. Okay, so we're going to go through. We have about 9. We may have 10. I may add one while we're going along here, but I have 9 different things that you need to consider at this point, because definitely we could see, if these countries don't take the bait, honestly. The big thing with Trump is he's saying, hey, if you don't stop acting like that, we're going to charge you. And hopefully, and we've seen it already, a number of companies. Taiwan has a very high import tax, but they're planning to invest in the U.S. and they're going to start doing things here. So there's a lot of good we're going to see out of this whole thing, in my opinion. I think we're going to see a lot of things. So first off, what is affected? Number one, the U.S. is one of the largest suppliers of food in the world. We can feed ourselves and we can feed a lot of people. And so really it comes down to choices. So one of the big things is food, groceries. We could see some increase, especially in like fresh produce. One of the things, I mean, Mexico's right there. And, we used to have that North American trade agreement and NAFTA, and that was supposed to be able to, lessen the trade restrictions, but that's kind of gone to the wayside. So we're getting taxed from Mexico, and then the goods and services we're sending down there has a higher tariff. So one of the places that we really do depend on a lot of fresh vegetables is Mexico. A lot of that, especially during the wintertime. Avocados, big deal. And I love avocados, man. Now, is this a prepping item? Well, not necessarily, but it does affect our food bill, which affects our ability to do some prepping, and it affects food prices. So, one of the things that it affects, again, it can really go way up during the winter times, according to how things pan out. Fresh produce, coffee. Coffee's a big one. And guys, to me, if I don't have coffee, it is SHTF. Got to have my coffee. Some of these countries that we're dealing with, that may be affected because they do charge us exorbitant higher prices for tariffs compared to ours. And Brazil is one of them. And of course, Nicaragua and some of those. Now, Nicaragua actually has backed off. And there's a lot of countries now that are coming in because our standard rate for the U.S. is 10% tariffs. One thing about the founding of this country was we were based on just the tariff system. And that was what was paid to pay for governmental services and our national defense and a lot of other things. And if we can get that trade imbalance, then when Donald Trump is talking about eliminating income tax, it is a possibility. But we've got to make sure it's fair trade. So coffee, seafood. One thing I found very interesting was a lot of our products our seafood comes from Vietnam. A lot of our shellfish, a lot of that comes from those areas. That competes with U.S. fishermen. One problem as well is, especially with U.S. fishermen, is that we have a lot of regulations, which some of these other countries do not. And that can also affect cost and production and their cost, their overhead. And so what we have though is the ability to have our own fishing industry to be built up to where we can provide a lot of the goods and a lot of the food for US consumers instead of buying them from other nations. And then, of course, meat and dairy. Now, cattle, we produce a lot of cattle and we export a lot of beef. But a lot of times when we're exporting beef into other countries, the tariff rates are so high. And so a lot of the cattle farmers have come out and said, hey, this is going to really help us because we're going to be able to sell more and get better pricing without paying for those tariffs that really up the price as well. So with that, beef is going to be possibly on the rise for this short period of time. One thing I will say personally, on a personal note, is that we buy a cow every year, sometimes more than that, and we split it with some of our friends who are also part of our prepper group. And so we buy good, fresh, local meat that's right here. The one thing that's happening right now, and over the past actually 3 or 4 months, is that a lot of people have the same idea. And so we're finding that it's getting more difficult to find fresher meat locally. I'll say this, guys, you should be buying and sourcing out a lot of your food from local farmers if you live in an area that has those available. Because what it does is if you have some kind of event, you are going to be able to have a local source to where you're not depending on people that are exports. It's another thing to me, food exports. I mean, that's great if we're going to get like a certain kind of blue crab, or we want some delicacy or something like that, or fruits and nuts, things that we can't necessarily grow here or grow in abundance. It's nice. It's nice to have, and obviously with coffee, but even with cocoa, having the cocoa beans, they have to be imported here. So for our chocolates and all those things, are those a prepping item? For some, maybe chocolate might be an SHTF, but those prices are typically going to go up. I would say this, guys, if the grocery prices start to increase in certain areas, you have other choices and we have other places to be able to put our money. And so I think that as preppers, we need to watch, and those items that are really going up in price, I think we can find surrogates in the American market, and we can be able to have our preps in a good shape. May not be exactly what you're wanting, but it does give you some more options. And let's just take for one thing, and that this is another one on the list, and then we're going to go to some questions. Listen, guys, I didn't mention this, but if you have questions, you can leave them at any time. Sarah Mack is over on the computer, and she is monitoring. And when we take a break, she can ask those questions. Alcohol. Now, alcohol, one of the things I love about, especially with liquor, is that I can use that as a barter item. You can also use it as medicinal purposes. And then, of course, obviously, you can use it for goodwill, just to have a drink, a stress reliever. But alcohol is one of those things that's affected. And some of the Canadian whiskeys and some of the wines from Europe and beers from Mexico, I mean, those can be affected. And while I love Dos Equis and I like Modelo, I'll drink. There's so many different craft beer that has opened up here in the U.S. that I think that we're going to be okay. But also with American liquors. And of course, we have now a very thriving wine industry, especially in Northern California, but actually in the mountains of North Carolina and Tennessee. There's a lot of places that are producing their own wine. And this is the thing, guys, it opens up more opportunities here. And it's the same thing that's happening to us on a different scale. So if we're sending wine to China and and we're selling this cheap wine, then their wine industry can't thrive as well. But here, our wine industry can thrive more because the demand increases domestically. So there are some feathering effects, just like the beer industry. There are pubs and breweries all over, local breweries. We have a number right here in this area, and it's really nice. And you can have what you want, and you don't have to drink those from Mexico or whatever from different countries. And yes, it limits your choice to a point, but yet on the other hand, maybe we have more choices. So it can be a matter of just kind of switching gears. But if you want your tequila, you're going to need to get that from Mexico. And your vodka, they do make it here in the U.S., but there are certain countries that actually excel in that. It's very similar to what happened with cigars in Cuba. Cuba cigars were, touted as the best cigars ever. And when we had to embargo those, we stopped allowing imports of cigars. It allowed for other countries to be able to produce those cigars, which this is the other side, is that when you have countries that are, if they have these tariffs, and like, let's say China, for instance, it's funny, a lot of from China is moving down into Vietnam because the standard of living in China has risen, and yet they're having stuff made in Vietnam, which is cheaper to have made. So it almost changes the fact that we can go to other countries and have things made instead of paying those exorbitant tariffs or having them to get rich off the backs of the U.S. with a trade deficit. So just some things to think about. Okay, let's go to a few questions if we have some, and then we'll keep moving.
Des de Dios says, "What is your true north in regards for your mindset when it comes to sensible prepping and or preparedness overall?"
Well, for one thing, prepping is a vehicle to get you ahead. It's not an end all. You should be moving maybe toward homesteading if you really want to be more self-sufficient. But even in the when the Great Western Expansion happened in the U.S., while people were a lot more self-sufficient, they did require certain things. So what happens is, to me, is we prep and we get that prep out there where it gives us the opportunity to make better decisions later. It's buying you time, and that's the way I look at it. But in the short term, I want to be as self-sufficient as I can. Now, that may be for a month, it may be for 3 months, it may be for a year. But let's face it, guys, even though we have food that's 30-year shelf life, overall, there are going to be goods and services and things that we're going to need. So what happens is we're buying time to where we get to a new normal, and then we can make better decisions, and it just gives us time. Here's the thing. You think about it, if you don't prep at all, you have no preps. You have just a little bit of food in your pantry, maybe a week's worth of food, and something happens. You're going to be panicked. You're going to make bad decisions. You're going to be at the mercy of others, or you're going to turn violent, and that's not an option. So prepping to me is just building up a certain time frame, let's say for a year, and we have what we need for that year, and then we just continue to work through that, heading toward self-sufficiency a little bit at a time as we can, to again homesteading. And then it just gives us more options. Let's face it, if you don't have food, then you're at the mercy of whoever does. And if there is no food, then you're just out of luck. So one thing I base all my preps on is the rule of threes. You have 3 minutes without air. You have 3 hours in harsh conditions. This is how long you can live. 3 hours in extreme harsh conditions. 3 days without water. 3 weeks without food. Self-defense, medical, flow in between. And could happen at any time. So I base my kind of the foundation on that, and then I expand out from that. So I hope that answers your question.
Elena M says, "But won't there be a delay in reestablishing the infrastructure that no longer exists to produce all the items that move to China and other countries to produce?"
Well, let me just say that China depends on us a lot more than we depend on them. And I know that may seem kind of funny, but there are other markets, there are things that we can do. So China, to me, is at the negotiating table. They may not be publicly saying it, but the reason why China's standard of living, and guys, over the past 20 years, it's incredible what China has done. I admire what they've done, honestly, but because of the U.S. consumer market, they have been able to really develop their country. And honestly, as far as the people there, the people are a lot more freedom minded. They're a lot more thinking more like they love America. It's honestly, it's the, and not everybody, but the government itself is the one that's hindering it. And they're the ones that are benefiting from these tariffs. They pass that more expense onto the Chinese people, which the Chinese people are buying from other countries or they're producing it themselves. So that deficit builds up. The thing is here in the US, yes, we may have a bump in the road, but I really feel that these countries are going to go, hey, America really holds all the cards. We are the largest consumer. So I really think, and we're already seeing it. We're seeing country after country. I'm seeing it every day. Hey, we're going to work. We're going to negotiate. We're going to do what's right. So I really don't think that there's going to be like all these countries just cutting us off, and then here we are. I just don't think that's going to happen. It is too profitable to be a partner with the U.S., whether it's a kind of a adversarial relationship like we have with China, or it's more of a uniform relationship maybe that we have with Europe or the UK. And so there are some factors there. So I don't think that we're going to see a disruption. I think that what we're talking about today is going to be a temporary holdup. But the other side of it is these things we're talking about are things that we are going to need to continue prepping as well.
Daniel Hampton says, "Hey Don, awesome channel. Just moved to Montana from communist California, looking to get a suppressor for 9mm. What do you recommend?"
That's awesome. Well, there's a lot of great suppressors out there, and here's the thing: free market. Let's just talk about that for a minute. We went to the Palmetto State Armory gathering, and there were tons of companies that are coming out with suppressors. I mean, all kind of suppressors. I think if you want to look at like top of the line, Microtech makes some of the best suppressors out there. I mean, they're military grade. In fact, they're selling to the military. So Microtech is one, but they're expensive. You go to your Silencer Co's. They're great suppressors as well. And again, there are so many, and we have tested a bunch of them. But one company that personally I really like is Silencer Central. And what I love about it is that you can actually order the suppressor online. You can fill out your paperwork online, and they'll ship it to your door. So Silencer Central to me, and they make incredible suppressors. In fact, their little Banish 22 is my favorite suppressor because it is so freaking quiet, and I just love shooting it. But again, there are a lot of options, and I could go all day talking about all the different suppressors. I just did a suppressor review on the Jaguar silencers, and it has the system underneath, the flow-through system that actually makes it shorter, and yet it's more effective because of the expansion chamber. Lots of cool ideas, lots of things going out there, and that's what America is good at. And then you have these different suppressor companies competing, and then the price goes down. They get their production in line. They find ways to produce cheaper, and it's just that free market economy. It goes really well with this tariff because it's not just here in the U.S., it's worldwide. The thing is, guys, it's hard to have a free market when you've got large fees put on the front end of any kind of export. Be the same thing here. So, but yeah, check out Silencer Central and of course Silencer Co. Guys, it's so easy now to get a suppressor. You go into some of the gun shops that have a kiosk and you can sit there and fill out your paperwork right there. And I think Silencer Co. right now is waiving the tax stamp. They'll actually pay your tax stamp. So check out Silencer Central. They send me suppressors. They are a sponsor of the channel as far as if I want a suppressor, they'll send it. So, and it makes it really nice. And I'm not just saying that, I love their suppressors. Okay, we'll come back to some questions. Let's get into this because we've got a few more things. Okay, energy. We get, in fact, Canada imports or exports 97% of their oil, their crude oil, to the U.S. We have some negotiating there. We can negotiate there because they do. Now, could they find other markets? Yes, and that is one thing to consider as well. But it's more difficult to have other markets when you have the Atlantic and the Pacific on either side. And so the U.S. is a natural plus for them to export their oil to the U.S. One of the things also is that their oil is actually richer than the thinner oils that are in Saudi Arabia. So the U.S. is geared toward refining their crude oil. There would be some changes that would be made if we were doing a lot more with this, with the Arab Emirates, the Saudis, and the different countries there. Plus, those countries are not always as friendly to the U.S. But keep in mind that the U.S. produces more oil than anybody else, and we export a lot of oil. All of that has tariffs put on it. So let's get a trade balance, and let's get it with Canada as well. Even though Canada does ship 97% of their crude oil, it's still a small fraction, honestly, of what we use here in the U.S. So again, we have a negotiation advantage when it comes to that, but those can be affected, and the price can be up to 40% higher until we get our production. In fact, I think the question before was about that bump in the road, and that could be a bump in the road. But we've already seen that the U.S. Fuel sources, the oil industry, is ramping up, and we're already seeing prices come down. So really, I think we're going to see prices overall with fuel coming down, and I think that there is a push to make sure we get our production up, we get our drilling back, we do more offshore drilling, we do all the things that we were doing before when gas prices were really low. And then, of course, when we shut off pipelines, shut off oil drilling, quit giving out leases, that affected our oil prices. And I think we're going to see naturally that these oil prices are going to come down. And we're going to see with these tariffs lifted, or at least balanced, that we're going to have more exports out to make more money. And I'll tell you guys, honestly, we may have some bumps and everything, but I'm really optimistic about what is going on with these tariffs. But on the other hand, short term, we need to make sure that we have what we need. So again, U.S. production's high. We do have some oil coming in from Canada, but also a lot of our electricity goes to Canada. So they are very dependent on us. And so that, again, gives us better trade negotiations. But we could see some increase. One thing I would recommend is going ahead and seeing how the prices go, and make sure that you have your supply of propane, you have your supply of fuels, gasoline for maybe generators or different machinery, or your vehicles. And for a short term, I would get those topped off and get them ready. Because here's the thing, guys, it's expensive to prep. I mean, there's a lot of things that you're needing to do, a lot of preparation, and that if you can do those things, it would save you money during a time maybe where things kind of move up. Okay, building materials. Building materials. I was about to jump ahead of myself. We do import a lot of timber and lumber from Canada. And that is definitely something that could affect us. One of the things that's happening is there is a construction boom, especially in certain areas. Where we live, it is massive, which is going to drive the prices of new construction and just the prices of homes overall. It's going to drive the price up. So if you're in the housing market, and here in this area, it's already gone through the roof. I can't imagine it going any higher. But right now, we're looking at building a deck. That could affect us. We're looking maybe at building a fence. That's going to affect us. Not only lumber, but also steel and aluminum. We do import a lot of steel and aluminum because we shipped a lot of our resources out of the country. One of the things that's coal. China is a big importer of our coal, but they charge this really high tariff on it. But overall, the one thing to remember is because certain countries have a high tariff rating that the U.S. is sending in products, a lot of times because of that tariff, there's not a lot really even going in because the demand is not there. And I think bringing those tariffs down again is going to increase our production. It's going to give us more avenues to be able to compete with those markets, and hopefully with a premium product. And that's a big thing. But steel and aluminum definitely can be affected. And so if there's certain things that you're planning to do, maybe it is reinforcing something or needing those materials, it could cost more. And on the manufacturing side, they need more steel and aluminum. And if these prices go up, that could affect our consumer goods on the other side. Temporary, hopefully, but with the tariffs, hopefully we can actually see things decrease to a lower level than they were before. Possibly. Okay, number 4 is clothing and footwear. It's funny where I live now in where I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, was called the textile capital of the world. There are mills everywhere in this area, clothing mills. And a number of years ago, in fact, about during the Clinton era, when he started allowing for manufacturing and this global initiative to kind of share the wealth and all this stuff at our own detriment. And you can go to any small town that's in this local area, and there will be a mill that's sitting there that's empty. They're all over this city and all around this area. And there are other areas too. And so it really destroyed textile industry here. There are some that are still functioning and they're producing goods. In fact, I have a good friend of mine that works in one, and they do produce a lot of cool stuff. And the quality is really high because that's the only way they can compete. But a lot of our clothing, a lot of our shoes, Nike, for instance, I mean, those things are made in China or in Taiwan or wherever. And so when we get those in, we charge a small tariff. When we are producing things here in the US and we're shipping them out, then the price is higher. So we're probably going to see quite a large increase on clothing and on footwear. But one thing too, and Vietnam just made an announcement where they're actually wanting to work with us. They had a very high tariff. In fact, it was 90% tariff, a 90% tariff. So it doubled the price of our goods going into Vietnam. Ours, because it was a little bit reciprocal, our reciprocal tariffs to really high tariffs is usually half or less, which is ridiculous. So what we're seeing is in China, though, or in Vietnam, they are producing a lot of clothes. In Mexico, they're producing a lot of clothes. And so while we may not be able to work a deal out with China, which I really think we're going to, but if we can't, there are other sources. And that's also one thing to consider, is that we're not, and we shouldn't be, dependent on one country for everything we're doing. I think it gives us an opportunity to negotiate with these other nations to be able to get good prices. And so clothing, though, could be affected. Footwear could be affected. If your boots are worn out, then go buy a pair of Danners or something. Of course, I don't know if they still make those in the US anymore, but backpacks, pouches, a lot of things are made in other countries. And so, if you're in need of backpacks, if you're like, hey, I need a go bag, you might want to go ahead and look for something and get you a good, solid, quality backpack. And that could be, because a lot of times with preppers, we have our go bags, we have our get home bags, we have our pouches we need for different things. You're setting up something for EDC, those prices could go up. So really stepping up now and saying, okay, I'm going to get a good quality backpack before the tariffs increase. Because really, a lot of our packs and things are made in China or in other countries. Maxpedition is made in Vietnam. Tim, that's where they produce them, and they're really high quality. They're excellent backpacks, even though that company is an American company. And I think one of the big things we're going to see too is a lot of industry coming to the U.S. We talked about it before. So let's say I have a backpack company. I am Mystery Ranch, and I am making these packs. I'm now going to be able to compete with other brands that have been really cheap, but they have great marketing. So it's just good to have. Honestly, overall, when you really look at just the principles of free trade, it's good for everyone. You get good quality, and yet you get a lower price for it if you play if things are panned out in a free market economy, because it does open up a lot more markets. Number 5 is electronics, and that's one thing that we could really be heard on. I mean, if you have an iPhone or Android for that matter, I mean, those are all made overseas. A lot of our radios, our emergency radios, our ham radios, I mean, you name it. A lot of that's coming from other areas. Flashlights, one that we kind of mentioned earlier. Flashlights are a big thing. and we've seen a surge in EDC flashlights. The quality, the performance has gone through the roof. It really it gives us a lot of advantages. And sights, your optics, all that stuff, all that's made in overseas. Most of it is made in China. And so we need to make sure that we balance that out. And then when we have certain optics that we're doing here, which we do, just like Trigicon's a great optic. And we can import those a little easier. Now, a lot of times, some of these things are restricted from with the U.S. because we want to keep those items here, especially things that are made for our U.S. military, and we don't export those. But electronics can be hindered. I won't tell you guys, and I have my emergency radio. I bought a number of them, just a Midland radio. I got it at Sportsman's Guide. And you have your solar panel, you have your crank, you have your rechargeable battery. But when we had these tornadoes that came through in a big storm, we had that emergency radio set up, and it will alarm you when there's an emergency alert. It'll just and if there's a tornado heading to your house. That's just storm. That's just normal things. Really having a good emergency radio, you can get shortwave, you can listen to different stations, and if there is some kind of grid down situation, you have a lot of ways to be able to power that emergency radio. Again, solar, hand crank, rechargeable batteries, gives you a number of options. And so you need to have that, especially because prices could go up on those and a lot of our electronics. I'm hoping temporary, but it's just a good opportunity to get those things. If you need a new phone, you might want to do that now. Okay, number 6 is vehicles and parts, auto parts. Okay, so vehicles. Obviously, we import a lot of vehicles, a lot from Japan, a lot from Europe, a lot from all over the world. And so these cars could face tariffs that increase the price of those vehicles. Also, auto parts. A lot of those parts are made in other countries, even for domestic vehicles. And Ford, Chevy, the big three, those are also affected because they do import some of their parts from other places. So if you're in the car market, that's not necessarily prepping, but if you're looking to build a bug out vehicle, if you need a new vehicle, if you need a truck, if you need things, and auto parts, which, of course, when you're repairing those things, the prices could go up on auto parts. So think about if you're in the market for that, that is something you might want to consider. ATVs, we have a 4-wheel drive ATV. It's Kawasaki. Obviously, it's made in Japan. The one thing about Japan, though, that kind of puzzles me is that it is a very dependent, because it's an island, and it's dependent on things coming into Japan. And yet we do protect Japan. And yet they do have a 46% tariff on our 20% tariff. I just think that's ridiculous. I think we need to have a fair trade. We give to them, they give to us, and we have a good market. We have a huge market for their vehicles. If we can match down to, let's say, 10%, and that's what our standard is, and Japan goes down to 10%, that's going to drop your price of Toyota down. It's going to give you a better price for your vehicles. So in the short term, may be higher. If the negotiation works, like Japan just signaled that they're willing to start working with us, that means the prices are actually going to go even further down. Not that they're going to remain, that they're going to actually go down. And that's the beautiful thing. Japan has moved a lot of their production here in the U.S. as far as with different manufacturers. So, in fact, one that's big here, which is German, is BMW. There's a big facility here. And that's going to bring more cars at a lower price right here, and it's going to give more jobs. I have a lot of friends that work at BMW. They make good money, and they're able to support their families, and a lot of industry was created around it. Making seats, doing this, doing that. There's a lot of things there that ensure some job stability in the area. So bringing manufacturing to the U.S. is huge. Okay, we're going to go to one more, and then we're going to go to some more questions because you guys bring out some great stuff. Alcohol. Again, your beers in Mexico, and you love Modelo. And so here you've got all these other different type beers. And honestly, I kind of covered this, so I'm just going to briefly talk about it again. Beers, alcohol, liquor, your wines, all those things. By the way, guys, you say I don't drink, but it's great for barter items. So just consider that, and medicinal purposes for a lot of things. One of the things that was a big deal during COVID was a lot of the congestion. And I'll tell you, whiskey and honey really works well on that. So, it just gives you an option that's not necessarily the medical. Okay, we got some questions. We'll go to that.
Lucky Driver says, question, how many ammo companies are 100% U.S. made and supplied?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that is one of the things we will be talking about coming up. But one of the problems is primers. I don't think we make any primers here in the U.S. That's a big thing. That's a big deal. Gunpowder is also one thing. So while we have Remington and Winchester, we have all these big ammo companies, the raw materials are dependent a lot of times on imports, which can affect us. With the war in Ukraine, there's been a big shortage of components because they're paying top dollar, our dollars, for ammunition components. And so that could definitely affect us. I'll be honest with you right now, guys, prices are low right now. 9 millimeter is like 21 cents a round. That's the lowest it's been in a while. 22 long rifle. Buy your ammo now, regardless, because there are some other extenuating factors that are going to play into ammo production and sales. Fiocchi, which is, they sponsor our channel on our Suits channel. They sponsor the ammo. It's an Italian company, but it is one of the largest suppliers of ammunition in our country. They have facilities right here making ammunition. And the more production we have, the less we have to depend on other countries. But we need to tie up and get some production on primers and ammunition. And then too, which is some of the raw materials. Sometimes a lot of them comes from other countries, the brass, the lead, those kind of things. And that's one thing that's really volatile. So that is one area. If you don't do anything else on this list, I highly recommend you buy ammunition. If we see some kind of uptick with protests for the summer, which we're already starting to see, the prices are going to get driven up because because the availability of ammunition could drop off. So I'll tell you guys, we have had ammo shortages 8 times over the past few years. And every time I tell people, buy ammo, buy ammo, buy ammo, and then they don't. And then when the ammo shortage comes, they're like, I don't have any ammo. Buy ammo.
Railroad Rumor asks, will tariffs drive up knife prices? Lots of knife makers overseas, Fox, for example.
Yes, and it's growing. What's going on, Travis? It's growing. I'll tell you, years ago, I'd buy a Chinese knife, Chinese tool, and the metallurgy wasn't that good. The heat treating wasn't that good, and they were just cheap junk. That has changed. The Chinese knives, some of those knives are as well made as anything here, and their technology has increased. So we are getting a lot, especially more toward the cheaper side. I think like your zero tolerance knife is great, but Kershaw, a lot of their knives are made overseas. They're basic Kershaw knives. They're good knives, but they're cheaper. If we have tariff wars and things start to happen, we will see knives have a problem. And I'm glad you brought that up. But we still have domestic knives produced here. They're just more expensive. So if you want a good utility knife, then a good imported knife works. If you want to go up and step it up, U.S. made knives, they're some of the best on the market. It's like this Microtech. I mean, they make some of the best knives, and this isn't out the side. It's an automatic. They make great knives and made right in North Carolina, not even an hour from us. But yes, knives could be affected. So if you're looking for a good bush knife or survival knife, or you're looking for just a good EDC knife, and you want something, you might want to look at that, because some of these steels and things, even though they're made here, can be imported. Sometimes the little screws, sometimes the box. There's a lot of factors.
Stephen McGregor asks, what are some good skills and knowledge to acquire to help with prepping? Things like woodworking, metalworking, chemistry, aquaponics, etc.
Oh yeah, there's so many. My wife's a labor and delivery nurse, or has been. She's retired now, but she was a labor and delivery nurse for 20 years, and she is all about natural remedies. And she gets into all this stuff about supplements, oils, different things, and then what's available. And that's a huge thing, especially for preppers, because we can, things when you get sick and you're not able to get pharmaceuticals, which is our next thing, and is medical supplies, antibiotics. I think it was 97% of antibiotics are made in China. If they shut that off, what are we going to do? So having other skills like that. One thing, in fact, I was down at the Georgia Bushcraft event in Watkinsville, Georgia this past weekend. And it's one of the things that's really cool is all the different things that they are demonstrating. I believe it was Dave Canterbury said that if you can manipulate steel or metals and manipulate wood, you can do about anything. And the thing is there's a lot of information on YouTube. I mean, there's just so much, and figuring it out. I was watching a video the other day. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was doing these water filter systems that are from natural materials, which I think is one thing that I'm really thinking about lately. And being able to filter water, taking a grapevine and putting in this muddy, nasty pond water and bringing it down, just the actual green saplings. And he took 3 of them and he tied them up and he put it in a jar, and it filtered the water. The water came through the vine and went all the way down. And these are like wood. I mean, they're vines, but they're thick wood. And the way that these vines translate water to the leaves, use the same process, and it kills all this different E. coli. And in fact, the water that he had in there was full of E. coli. The water, when it finished, there was no E. coli in it. And there are different ways to be able to figure out how to, and there's a lot of resources. So do your investigations, but don't stop there. And that's one thing I think a lot of people do. They have all this head knowledge about how to do something, and they don't put it to practice. Build a fire in the rain. That's something that honestly, it's not super difficult. But if you don't know a few things, it's going to be very difficult. We had rain one time for 3 days, and I went out and I built a fire in the rain, and it's doable. But you got to have some knowledge. It doesn't take a lot of special knowledge, but it does take knowledge. So anything that can be used, and what I like to think about is without power. So let's look at 1800s. What can I do in a more primitive or a more basic or traditional way and learn from it? That is going to be huge. And the big thing is if you can acquire those skills now in a grid down situation, you're going to be very valuable to your community. So that's also important. So yes, I think you're on the right track. But those things. But again, water, medical, those are big ones. Okay, we're going to continue on because we're going to run out of time. Well, actually, I answered those. Medical's a big deal. Medical supplies, those are something that you need to have put back. As a prepper, one thing I want to mention, though, especially something a lot of people don't think about, is when you're getting your IFAC and you're getting your medical kit together for a grid down situation, and you have everything you think you need, buy gauze, lots of gauze. And the reason for that is just like this knife. If I cut myself with this knife really well and I'm bleeding and I have to wrap it up, we have to clean it. And then it's so deep that it takes a while to heal. I've got to use that gauze. Then got to clean it. Then got to use that gauze. Gunshot wound, maybe an axe when you're cutting something and you cut yourself. Any kind of wound that you're going to need to dress over and over, gauze is going to be important. Yes, you can use a shirt, but man, there's all kind of bacteria and everything else on there. So having some sterile gauze put back, and make sure you have a nice amount of that gauze. And a lot of that gauze is imported. So that's one thing, one of the things that a lot of people don't think about is a lot of gauze. And then, of course, your standard microbials, your antibiotic ointments, things like that, that you can keep down some kind of infection, because that's going to be the biggest killer. All right, let's go to more questions.
Jalil Ringgold asked, what do you think about pre-packed 72-hour bags from online stores like Amazon, Academy, Walmart, etc.?
Okay, there's two elements here. Number one is a lot of people just don't have the time, or they don't want to spend the time to put one together. I think, and we've done some of those bags, and I think that is better than nothing. So I'm not gonna push you against it. What I would say is you'll have a better bag if you take the time to put it together. Number one, you'll know what you're putting in there. And there's a ton of different resources out there to build a really good bag. We went to Walmart, built the cheapest bag we could possibly build, and we built it. And it would be better than some of these pre-made bags, just to be honest. But do you have the time or the knowledge to put all that together? That's going to be your biggest thing. Do you have the time to do it? Are you willing to spend the time to do it? So, but some of these bags I put together, they've actually been like, well, this is going to give you a fighting chance. It's going to help. Some of the stuff is not going to last too long, but it will give you some chance for survival above not having it. Building a good solid bag, putting the items that you really want is just going to give you a better chance for longer, just for longer. One of the things that for Fowl in the Modern Survival Guide for the Coming Economic Collapse, this is especially right now. If you're worried about these tariffs tearing up the economy, you need to buy this book. I have a link down below in the description for Fowl. These are actual events that happened in Argentina when everything collapsed. And one of the things he said was that when everything went down, all he had for a knife was a Rambo survival knife. Those things are cheap. They're made of pot metal. And he said it got him through the entire event, using it for different things, not necessarily for self-defense, but using it for bushcraft or whatever he was trying to do. And it really got him through that, which I thought was very fascinating. So don't be too hung up on the $250 knife and put that into medical supplies or prepping, your food or a water system, and buy a decent knife. Now, again, if these tariffs start to affect those lesser expensive knives, that can affect your pocketbook as well. But great book. There's a link down below in the description, and a lot of people buy these because this is one of my staples for our prepping. All right, guys, looks like we're at the 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock range. And again, big thanks to Exotac. Build a fire kit. It's essential. You need fire, and fire gets us through. Cooks your water, boils your food, gives you light, gives you heat, keeps predators at bay, and it gives you a lot of morale. Fire, very important. And Exotac gives a 20% off using Suits 20. And they even have a tool roll that you can actually put all your stuff in if you want to set it up and have redundancy, not just a dumb Bic lighter. I love Bic lighters. They're the most convenient. They're wonderful, but they go out more than any other tool for fire. Also, check out Suits Gear. We really appreciate suitsgear.com. And we do a monthly giveaway. We're working on one. We have one right now for the month of April. And all you need to do is go in, throw your email address in it, and you're entered. And you can sign up for our regular newsletter. We do a lot of stuff over there and have a lot of cool Suits merch. And we've got some actual sensible prepper stuff that we're working on specifically. So, guys, don't be scared of these tariffs. I think in the long run, it's going to really revamp our economy. It's going to kickstart. It's going to get us into a much better position. I would be careful listening to a lot of the doomsayers with this. But what I will say is, regardless, is take this opportunity to pick up these items that you need. Fill these holes. While some of the prices that are lesser expensive could go up for a short period of time, these are the items that you may need in a survival situation. And, and guys, again, I'm a disclaimer. I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert, but I do know that free market economy is the best in the world. And it's the reason why the U.S. has become what it has become. And what it's become lately is because of stifling that free market economy. Big thanks to Sarah Mack for getting the questions to me. Thank you for being here, and a lot of great questions. You guys always have that. So be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.